Alright folks, welcome to Chapter 1, Introduction to Computer User Support. A lot of these web classes don't typically have videos for each chapter, but I'm going to try to put these in for you guys to kind of give you some benefit of my experience. So the slides always start out with the objectives, what they hope you're going to learn, and then they get into the meat. So first we're going to talk about end user computing. So end user computing is just the person using the computer on the other end. That's the end user. So the use of computers for both personal and business use is called end user computing. Now in the real world, do we use that term, end user computing? No. But we do say end user, although we've typically shortened that to the users. Alright, knowledge worker. Way back in the 50s, Peter Drucker came up with this term. That's really anybody that deals with information, processing, collecting, preparing, distributing information. And he actually, again, we're talking about way back in the 50s when computers weren't really embraced by the world, the business world, things like that. And at the time, I think he was still over in Japan. But he actually saw the trend coming and kind of realized that was going to explode and kind of predicted it. So a knowledge worker is typically anybody that works with computers, things like that. So the term used to be used, used to be a lot more popular at the end of the 90s and things like that. I've never heard the term in the real world, oh, hey, you're a knowledge worker. Let's talk about those 5 knowledge workers. Doesn't really come up anymore. But for your book, you'll need to know that. Now, make sure you understand what a GUI is. A GUI is a graphical user interface. So if you're configuring a firewall, which is a little security appliance, you've got 2 choices. You can either do it through the CLI, the command line interface, where you have to type in the commands word for word. And that's all you see on the screen are, letters. Or you can use a GUI, which is a graphical user interface. Now, when Windows first came out, before Windows we had DOS. And DOS was completely command line based. So you had to remember all the different commands. I had to change directory and I had to make new directory and stuff like that. So because that was difficult and a lot harder to learn, a lot of people tended to try to learn computing and then realize, hey, this is kind of too hard. All these commands, blah, that I have to memorize. So what Bill Gates did was he made a GUI for DOS. So the very first Windows program was just pretty pictures and stuff, and then when you clicked on a picture or you did something, it ran the DOS command in the background. So now it was easier to learn computing because you didn't have to memorize all the commands. I could just right-click a file and rename it. And when I did that, it would say, hey, rename this to this, and do the DOS command. So that's a graphical user interface. Windows is a GUI. It's a GUI of the operating system. So anytime you have pretty pictures on the screen that you can manipulate and little drop-down boxes, things like that, that's all considered a GUI. When you buy different equipment out there, like let's say you're buying firewalls, it's good to know like what the vendor prefers in order to manipulate that device, like Cisco. Most of the Cisco stuff, Cisco prefers you to use the command line interface. Their CCNA program, all 4 classes are command line interface. You have to memorize the commands. There is a GUI to work with the Cisco equipment. They don't want you to theoretically use that. They'd rather you know the command line stuff. Where if you go buy a Sonic Wall firewall, they have a GUI and they want you to use the GUI because it's much easier. So make sure whenever you're buying equipment, you find out whether the vendor prefers the CLI or the GUI. Alright, so milestones in the adaptation of computer technology. So back in the 40s, they invented the first CPUs, and then they started coming out with devices they could attach to the CPU. So what kind of devices do you think they had at the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s? What kind of peripherals do you think they had? Look at this thing. We used to program these CPUs and these first computers with punch cards. It was miserable. Each punch card, you punched the binary equivalent of what you were trying to do. So if you're trying to write the number 2, you had to punch, 8 different dots to say, hey, this is a 1, this is a 0. This is, remember, in binary, a byte is 8 bits. So you would need to have 8 little blocks punched or 8 little blocks of space to decide where to punch. If you don't understand binary yet, it's okay. But basically, each card only did like 2 or 3 letters of your code. So you had to have a stack of cards like this, all in order, and make sure you place them in order. So we had big boxes like this of punch cards, and then you had to load each punch card in individually, and then make sure you put it back in the right order, because if for some reason these got out of order, your code didn't work. Then in the 50s, with the miracle of technology, we came up with tape drives. Oh, so miserable. When I first started out the help desk, I started with a medical organization, Akron General Health System, and they still, in order to get Medicare or some governmental insurance, they actually, and this is in the 90s, they actually had to send their data on a tape. So it was the only device, the only tape device that they used was for this one government agency to process these insurance claims, and they would only accept a certain brand type size of tape, and everybody else, took everything electronically except for this one place. It was miserable, but you get the idea. All right, so in the 50s, we had tape drives, and that's where you got there were a few very large companies that started buying these huge mainframes to store data in. And then that kind of grew in the 60s, but in the 60s they started making what they called thin clients and some smaller computers. And what thin clients were, they allowed you to, it was kind of like a shell of a computer that would then connect to the mainframe so you could run different reports and things like that. It started out as a terminal, and then they became thin clients. So they didn't have hard drives, they didn't have a bunch of memory, they didn't have a big CPU. They just had just enough to turn on and connect to the database, and then they would show you information from the database. So in the 60s, we started seeing smaller computers, then we started seeing workgroup computers. Computers started to be connected to each other. Then in the 70s, that kind of blew up, and then we started seeing more and more computers. And then that's where the personal computer first came out. And then in the 80s, we started actually seeing personal computers in the homes. And then by the 90s, the internet started to grow, and we started distributing the growth of the internet and just how big it grew and how fast. When I was a kid, if you wanted to get information, you actually had to go to the neighbor's house and borrow their Encyclopedia Britannica that may have already been like 8 years old. And there wasn't a ton of information on every cell. Like obviously that came in like 26 volumes and things like that. So, but how much information can you put in one book about the world? Now you guys go to the internet and you guys got you got access to the entire world's knowledge. All right, so then the 2000s, low-cost PCs, things like that, and then 2010, we've got integrated technology in everything. We've got phones that have more power than the computers did way back in the day. And we've got cloud computing. So the 80s and 90s were really like the big kind of growth years for PCs and the IT industry. And because what had happened was we needed new applications. The applications that were out there, there just weren't enough to do all the stuff we wanted to do. We're like, hey, I got this great big computer. Why can't I just take inventory and write, and type with it? Why can't I do other stuff? So there were all these new requests for new software. It was becoming easier and easier to use. Once Windows came out, Windows kind of really helped to make computers more friendly for users, which obviously the more friendly they are, the more adapted they are, so more people buy them. Prices started to come down, software started getting cheaper, and because of the user-friendly GUIs, people started putting them in their homes, things like that. And so at that point, it kind of blew up. And that's really where the IT industry kind of really got built, where the backbone kind of grew. And that's where like IT guys really started to make a lot of money because people thought, oh, it's so hard to do this stuff because you had to know binary. Back in the day when you wanted to connect to the internet, you had to pay like $3 an hour. You had to have a modem, and you had to write custom modem strings to connect to these things, and it was crazy the stuff you had to know. All right, distributed computing. So distributed computing just means computer resources are distributed through an organization according to the location and needs of the workers. So what that just means is we push the PCs out across the entire organization. Think about a company like General Motors. they have distributed computers. They have computers in all of their facilities that all connect to, core servers and things like that. And now in 2010, well, actually, it wasn't necessarily 2010, but now we have cloud computing. So what's cloud computing? Do we just store everything in the air? No. The symbol on charts for the internet has always been a cloud. So that's why they call it cloud computing. It just means we're storing things on the internet or to some remote site that's not in our facility. So when you're using Gmail, that's a cloud email system. And what's really happening that today, and when I say today, I'm talking about 2015, we're starting to see more and more businesses move away from buying their own devices and move to the cloud. When I first started in IT, and really up until this point, whenever a company wanted to start itself, it had to go out and buy an email server, and then a file server, and then expensive software to back those servers up, and expensive software to run whatever they're doing. We needed some kind of management application. We needed scheduling software for a medical organization. We need radiology software. We need electronic medical record. So we had this huge upfront cost. And then we needed to hire people to take care of it. And then we needed to build special locations to store this stuff. Your computers push out, or your servers push out a boatload of heat. So you had to have special cooling and backup cooling and backup power. And the cost for this stuff is crazy. So now, because the internet and bandwidth is so much better than it ever was, we're at the best point ever, really, as far as the internet goes, that it's a lot easier to just say, hey, I'm just going to rent space on a server and just pay for what I use. So now instead of having to go buy a $5,000 server, I can spend, $100 or $200 a month and rent some space on a virtual server. And then if I ever need more speed or more space, I just call up the company that's hosting my stuff and say, hey, give me more stuff. And they just increase the size of your virtual machine. Where in the real world, if I need more space, I might have to buy a whole new server. And then what do I do with the old server? It becomes junk? Do I find some other use for it? You get the idea. So that's cloud computing. We're moving things to the internet. All right, end users. When we're talking about end users, there's a bunch of different factors you got to kind of throw in there. Is it a personal user? Because do I work at Geek Squad and I go to people's homes, or am I an in-house corporate IT person? Am I a corporate person? Am I an organizational person? Am I an enterprise user? I know a guy that works for Palo Alto. They're like a competitor to Cisco. They make security devices and things like that. And he works all over the world. 2 weeks every month, he's across the planet. Singapore, all over the place. So he works for a huge enterprise fixing that kind of stuff. What's the skill level of the end user? Are they novice, semi-skilled, expert? Do they frequently use our stuff? Are they extensive users? What kind of software do they use? Do they use word processing, email, accounting? Are they a gamer? Gamers have a lot more hardware needs than your grandma who just needs email and a little bit of the internet. What kind of features do they need? Are they power users? Are they always hammering their stuff? Most of your photographers and video people are power users. They're storing large amounts of data on their PC. They're on their PCs a lot, editing photos and things like that. And then are they an internal user like a coworker, or are they an external user like a client? If I'm the in-house help desk and I'm helping other employees, I'm an internal worker, and I'm more helping my coworkers. But if I work for Geek Squad, I'm helping external users. So that kind of figure fits that. So resources. What kind of resources does an end user use? Obviously, they have basic hardware. We have a monitor, we have a mouse, we have a keyboard. But what other stuff do we use? Nowadays, it's not odd to walk in a home and see peripherals you're not used to seeing. Artists use these taboo like sketch pads that they can sketch on, and it actually shows up on the screen. Some people have scanners, printers, copiers. There's so many different peripherals out there. There's no way you can know everything that's out there. But when you're supporting home users, there's all kinds of stuff you can run into. Usually when you work for a company, that company has kind of standardized their stuff, and after you've been there for a few weeks, you're not really going to see a whole lot of new stuff. All right. And then, are they going to need a hardware maintenance agreement? Are they going to need upgrades? What kind of software do they have? Is that going to be, is that going to work with other software? Is their software going to need upgraded? You would be surprised how often people do not update their applications. And that was a big reason a lot of people got viruses. They weren't updating their antivirus software. They weren't updating their Windows servers. I'm sorry, their Windows PCs. I had a neighbor, and this was a few years back though. But when I say a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I said, hey, my PC's got a bunch of stuff in it. Can you look at it? And I went and looked, and he had Windows XP, but he had the base version. Now, mine was on Service Pack 3 near end of life because Windows 7 had come out or something like that, or Vista. He was still running Windows XP with the basic, with no service packs. He had never updated his computer ever. And you'll see that a lot. All right, things end users need. They need supplies. So if I got a printer, then I need, ink. If I got a copy scanner fax, I need paper. I need toner. They have data and information that they use. They need support. They need facilities. They need administration. There's all kinds of overhead involved with that. All right, so sales guys love to use this term, total cost of ownership, TCO. Well, and give you a quick story. As I was director of IT at the North Cape Medical Foundation, I had a guy come in from a copier company, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to save you all kinds of money today. If we take all your printers out of here, and we install our copy machines, we can get your cost per page to like 10 cents, and you're probably averaging about 16 cents. So your total cost of ownership is going to go down 6 cents a page." And he's like, and we've got all kinds of research to prove that you're probably at 16 cents a page. And I'm like, well, let me go look for myself and run my own stuff. So when I looked, I took a couple printers and said, hey, how much do we pay for maintenance for these printers per year? How much are we paying for toner? And then I added a little bit extra for the IT support for that stuff. And it came out that we were at about 6 cents per page. So his numbers were way off. But total cost of ownership just means, what is my total cost to operate that stuff? When we look at a car, let's say it's a $10,000 used car. We're like, oh, hey, my total cost of ownership is $10,000. Well, no, it's not. How much gas does it take to run that car? Do I need to put oil in there? Do the brakes need replaced? Do I need to put new tires on there? So it's the total cost of ownership over the life of that device. So on PCs and stuff, it's do I got to add peripherals? Do I need to do hardware maintenance and then subcontract that out? Do I got to pay for upgrades? Do I got to pay for software? Do I need to pay for supplies? Do I need to pay for storing my data? Do I need to pay for tech support? You get the idea. So it's total cost of ownership is the total cost of ownership. What is my lifetime cost for this device? Your average PC that costs about $1,000, the total cost of ownership really is about $2,000. Your average PC lasts between 3 and 5 years in corporate America. Now remember, when I say 3 to 5 years in corporate America, I'm talking about the small computers that they buy. They typically buy $500 to $800 units. They're not buying big gaming PCs. They're buying PCs that allow the users to run their software, to access the internet, and access email. So nothing big. So most places typically have a rotation where all PCs are replaced every 3 to 5 years. All right, end user application software. We have email and instant messaging. A lot of places have internal messaging servers so that everybody can just IM each other rather than waste up precious storage space on the email server. Because instant messaging doesn't necessarily need to be stored. We have web browsers. The one that comes with Windows is Internet Explorer. Most of us use Firefox. Your big IT guys that are into a little bit of everything typically stay away from Chrome. Cisco applications don't like Chrome at all. Like if I take a Cisco firewall and I try to access the GUI interface, and remember when I say GUI, we're talking the graphical user interface. We typically we use the word GUI to refer to GUI. So when I use the GUI on the firewall and I'm using Chrome, it actually just doesn't come up. So you have to run Firefox or Internet Explorer. All right, word processing. We have Microsoft Word. That's the biggest word processor out there. But there are other ones. If you go to OpenOffice, OpenOffice has its own word processor and it's free. Spreadsheets. When we're doing spreadsheets, we're talking about Microsoft Excel. Database management. Now we're talking about SQL or SQL. That's the Microsoft product, or Oracle. That's its big competitor. And then graphics. All kinds of graphics programs out there. For 3D animation, we use Blender or 3D Max, but you get the idea. And then are we doing planning and scheduling software, desktop publishing, all kinds of things, different software packages you can buy. Am I making websites? If I'm making websites, what am I using? Am I doing HTML? Am I doing PHP? There's so many different programs out there to allow you to just write website code. Am I making educational software, entertainment software? You know, think about the industry. Like if you just think about healthcare, what kind of software does healthcare need? They need a radiology management system to take x-rays and mark those x-rays with the patient's name. And then whenever an x-ray is done, it needs to be sent somewhere to a coding system so that we can code, hey, how much are we going to charge for this x-ray? How much are we going to charge the patient for this MRI? How much are we going to charge for the CT? And then we need to figure out, then we need something to connect to all these different insurance companies, because different insurance companies will all pay a different amount for all these different devices. And then we need to schedule patients, and then we need to, you know, have patient information. And then we need to be able to bill patients. And so all that different software all comes into play, and that's all in addition to, you know, internet software, your browser, email, instant messaging, that kind of stuff. All right, so problems with end user experience. End users obviously waste resources. They make mistakes. You have issues with computer crime. People steal stuff right out of your building. They access privacy information. Some users are abusive. You have computer viruses and health problems. So, waste of resources. A purchase decision is made by somebody who lacks experience. So somebody buys $800 PCs when really the $500 PC would have worked. So that's a waste of resources. Now I have $300 worth of PC for this user who's only doing email and internet. Why did I spend that much? Or a user is really inexperienced and spends an excessive amount of time trying to solve a problem. Or a worker spends time on non-business related activities, which means the user is sitting there and they're surfing, you know, careerbuilder.com or monster.com for a new job for an hour while they're on the clock. So as a help desk user, a lot of times it's up to you to decide what's best for the company. What is the best use of your time? And the best rule of thumb is productivity. You want to get the most productive workers, the workers that make the most money for the company, up and running first. Like if I got a user that has a printer problem, and then I got a physician that can't do his reporting, I'm going to the physician first because they generate revenue. The person who just needs to print isn't generating revenue, if that helps. All right, user mistakes. User enters the wrong information in the spreadsheet. User deletes or uninstalls needed software. Or user loses data because this information is not backed up. But you get the idea. And users will make a boatload of mistakes. And they lie about it so bad. You're going to go up and you're going to see, my very first help desk call was a woman who was eating Cheetos at her desk. The empty bag of Cheetos was like in the corner of her cubicle. She had Cheeto dust all over her fingers, and she called because her mouse didn't work. And when we got there, the other guy that showed me like where she was at, he's like laughing and kind of elbowing me. And I'm like, ma'am, have you been eating at your desk? And she's like, no, no, no. And she was a big woman. And she's like 50. And she's like, my mouse just doesn't work. So, you know, I undid the ball and pulled the ball out of her mouse, and it was so much cheese dust in there. It was nasty. There was like crumbs and stuff all over her desk, her keyboard. And I'm like, ma'am, are you eating at your desk? No! So they will look to you right in your face and lie to you. So you get the idea. All right, computer crime. Workers try to profit from valuable company information. This is obviously very prevalent in the finance and the investing industry. Hey, a user finds out there's going to be a new merger and they go out and buy the stock. Or a user becomes a victim of identity theft because somebody ganked their information. All right, theft of resources. Users illegally copy software. We're pirating. Users copy company or uses internet access to sell items online. So while I'm sitting there at my lunch break, or maybe it's not even lunch break, it's just I'm on the clock. I'm on eBay trying to sell my crap because I don't have internet at home. Or users fail to turn in or report a lost USB drive. So I lose equipment and I don't turn it and I don't report it so the company can claim it on their taxes or their insurance. Or the IT guy runs out, and this used to happen much more often back in the day. Nowadays we kind of install everything remotely. But we used to have to go and install Microsoft Office in a user's computer. Every once in a while, we would forget the disk. So I'd go to the user's computer, I'd put my disk in, I'd install it, put the code in, and then the user would get you talking, so you would forget that you left the disk in the drive. And then you would go back to the office. Then you're like, oh crap, I need to go back and get that disk. When I would go back there, the disk would be gone. Users were very sly about stealing CDs and stuff like that back in the day. Nowadays, whenever a user needs Office, we just kind of push it out remotely, which helps us. All right, invasion of privacy. Hey, this user's, somebody's accessing my equipment. When famous people go to the hospital, the paparazzi go to the hospital and they wait for people outside and hey, give me information on this person. I'll pay you all kinds of money. They try to get access to their medical records, things like that. Abusive users. User sends unwanted email to a coworker. Hey, here's a picture of my junk. Come out and date me. User displays off-color material visible to coworkers. Actually, sometimes you get physically abusive users. We had a physician at this at the foundation where I worked, and he was just crazy hard on his laptop. He had like a laptop PC that kind of turned into a tablet, and he was supposed to be charting on that. And 3 different times, the guy, he'd like put a pen on the keyboard and just leave his pen there and then slam the lid down and crack the glass of the screen. And he'd eat over his laptop while he was working on it and just filled the keyboard with just crap. And it was so dirty and nasty. After the 3rd time, we finally went to the CEO and said, hey, this guy keeps breaking laptops. We need to quit taking this money out of the IT budget. It needs to come out of his own budget. And then after that, he started breaking them. Then he ended up his 4th laptop after he broke it. He didn't want to pay for it, so he just continued to use it as a pile of crap. But you get the idea. All right, computer viruses. Your users will try to circumvent your security. When you talk about a company and their security stuff, we typically focus on the perimeter. We buy antivirus software, we buy mail spamming devices, we buy a firewall, and we try to keep everything from getting inside the company. But then here comes Joe Donut user, and he's like, oh, I'm going to go to Morpheus or LimeWire or some other site, and I'm going to copy me some MP3s or a movie. And he copies that stuff, and it's riddled with viruses. And then he puts it on a CD, walks right through the company, and pops it on his PC, and boom, his PC's infected. And then once his PC gets infected, it shuts the antivirus off, then it jumps to another PC, turns the antivirus off, and next thing you know, you've got all kinds of issues. All right, then there's the issue with health problems. Way back in the day when we first started doing PCs more actively, you would be at your PC 24/7. Nowadays, we tend to not do that. We tend to take breaks, things like that. But it used to be you sat at your desk and you worked for 4 hours, then you had a lunch, then you came back and you worked for 4 hours at your desk. Nowadays, not so much. So ergonomics is just, we need to study the workspace and how it promotes worker health. And we have ergonomic chairs and ergonomic keyboards. The ergonomic keyboards are a hard sell to most users. I'll give you an example. We had like a little area where we had 8 users that would all handle like patient issues. So, patient would come down, sit down, and they would help them with billing issues or things like that. So we bought them ergonomic keyboards because they were all a bunch of old ladies and they were complaining about, oh, it hurts, da da da. So we bought them ergonomic keyboards. They all hated them the first day. Hated them. But we told them, you have to use this for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, we'll give you your old one back. And after 2 weeks, 7 out of the 8 wanted to keep their ergonomic keyboards and really started to love it. But carpal tunnel is something that happens inside your wrist and sometimes the hands where your muscles get stressed from doing the same repetitive motion too much. And it can actually get very painful, and sometimes users have to get surgery and things like that. So it can force you in early retirement, cause you pain, things like that. So we have to think about, how high is a user sitting off their desk? What kind of chair are they sitting on? What kind of keyboard are they using? Are their arms high enough? Are their wrists straight? Is their back straight? Things like that. So we had a recession between 2007 and 2008, and unemployment kind of went up. As unemployment goes up, people are less picky about their jobs, and people are more happier to have a job. So we see less user support and things like that. We also get less complaining from our users. All right, so the user support function. Typically, computer user support, we have lower level of services. Hey, I need a new mouse, I need a new keyboard, I need you to fix my printer. We have help desk services. So there's a broad spectrum. So most of the help desk stuff is computer support. Technical support is typically higher level. I'm having a problem with my IP. I can't connect remotely, things like that. I can't access a network share, things like that. So there's a specific narrower focus, and it takes more advanced troubleshooting and more knowledge. All right, how organizations provide a user support function. Sometimes there's peer support. Sometimes there's part-time peer support. Sometimes we use a help desk. Sometimes we have a user support center, which is a really cool help desk. Sometimes we put a knowledge worker in the team. So give an example. When I worked for Visiting Nurse Service under Akron General, they had these nurses that would chart and do stuff together. So the nurses were all in teams of 6. So we would pick one nurse out of the 6 that we liked the most and thought was the most intelligent, and we would show them how to do stuff. Here's how you manipulate your email. Here's how you reserve rooms, conference rooms. Here's how you do this. So we would we'd have training sessions with these key employees. And then whenever somebody in that team needed help, they went to that key employee first, so we were able to relieve a lot of calls on the help desk. So peer support, obviously, you just, hey, how do I do this? You just got to talk to the guy next to you. Part-time support, some small organizations can't justify a full-time user, like McDonald's. Why would McDonald's need a full-time IT person for each store? Well, they don't. They just need a part-time guy, somebody to call only when there's a problem. User support team, we have a formal work group that provides support, or the help desk. The help desk is, again, you've got a couple guys, they're on the phone, they're the single point of contact. When you have an issue, you call the help desk. If the help desk can't fix it, they create a ticket, and then the tier 2 guy kind of goes out. A user support center gives you more information than a help desk. They actually will help you to pick out a PC, pick out software for home, things like that. All right, your support services come in a wide variety of users and different things. Crap. Let's go back to this. So as a support person, you may work at a help desk and answer phone calls or do chat and provide information. You may do troubleshooting assistance for hardware, internet. You know, Time Warner Cable has been hiring like 12 to 25 students every semester to work at their office right here on Whipple. I'm sorry, is it Whipple? Yeah, it's Whipple. Where they provide internet support. And that area is growing huge, and that was like one of the key areas for Time Warner Cable. Everybody that I talk to that works there talks about all the awards that they get and how much better they are. At that location there, they actually do support for several states around Ohio. So it's not just this area or Ohio that they do support for. And because it's so good, they're actually growing their area because they're much better than some of these other places. So these other support facilities are actually losing area and losing staff, while this one that's here on Whipple and Canton is actually growing. So you may evaluate hardware needs and software needs or network products. You may coordinate support standards. When is a user allowed to use the internet? Are they allowed to use the internet? Are they not allowed to use the internet? What are they allowed to use the internet for? What websites are they allowed to go to? What are they allowed to bring in and put in their PC? Are they allowed to bring in their own music? If they bring in their own music, are they allowed to bring in a CD that they burn, which could have a virus, or are they allowed to bring in a CD that they bought at Best Buy that's, you know, obviously from the manufacturer? So lots of different tasks that you could perform. All right, what this picture is trying to say, I have no idea. So your level 1 help desk, the job description, could really be anything, but they always include something at the end of these that say, and all other duties as assigned, which kind of covers everything else that they want you to do. Your typical level 1 help desk guy, he's on the phone. Somebody calls and they have an issue. If it's a password issue, he's able to typically fix those. You know, hey, I locked myself out of my email. I locked myself out of my computer, that kind of stuff. He can fix those passwords. He can do some basic troubleshooting on the PC. But other than that, his job is just to write the ticket up. So we have some kind of software that allows me to say, hey, Joe Donut called. He's got a problem with his computer. Here's all the information I got from him. So the job description has an overall position overview. And then it has the individual duties that they like. Remember, at the end, they always have something that says, you know, does all this, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at what they want from a level 1 person, provides tier 1 tech support, provides support for users and face-to-face contacts, installs and tests hardware and software, diagnoses and repairs, troubleshoots, advises user on best practices, prepares reports and technical documentation. It's actually a lot of stuff. Then you'll see the qualifications. We want, 3 years of this and 2 years of that and this degree and blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Education minimum 2 years, A+. Remember, A+ is that PC repair technician certification. And then from help desk, you typically go up to tier 2 or tier 3, and then you're trying to get out of the help desk and get into network support. Because now network support, you kind of start getting away from the local users. Now, you don't get totally away, but you're not. That's not your job. Your job is not just answering the phone and fixing user problems. You're not waiting for a user to call you and do something. You're going to do something to the router, or you're going to set up a printer, or you're going to do some remote share. So it's it's a different style of job, but it all depends where you're at. You're monitoring servers. I'm monitoring performance. And how much of my memory am I using on the server? How much hard drive space is left? When am I going to need to add new hard drive space? What's my processor utilization? Is this server overutilized? I'm changing backup tapes. I'm writing the logs. I'm writing standards for best practices, things like that. And then you get the idea. Network Plus, 1 to 2 years of experience, da-da-da. All right, so what a worker needs to know to perform a job. They typically want to know how many years of education you have, what degree you have, what certifications you have, and a list of specific topics. Now, when you graduate the college, you are going to be competing for the same jobs with everybody else. Remember, the college has 2 or 3 different IT types of programs. There's a Linux program, there's a Microsoft Network Administrator program, there's a Cisco program, there's this program, the Help Desk. So there's 4 different programs that are going to be pushing people out. You're all going to have a 2-year degree. So what's going to make you different from everybody else? Remember, so here you and Joe Donut are both competing for the same job. You're both Stark State graduates. You both got your degree in the hand. What's it going to be? The degree and the other stuff really gets you the job interview. And then it's your interview skills that really help you to get that job, or anything else that can help you be different. Certifications are the biggest thing. The biggest thing that helped me get my first IT job was I had A+ and Network Plus. So when I was there was some other guy, and they liked us both. And they didn't know who to choose. But he didn't have any certifications. I did. So they hired me. And that was what helped me start my help desk and my IT career. So certifications, A+, Network Plus are the 2 easiest ones to get. Computer technician or network technician. After that, any experience you could get, whether it's a free internship, if you know somebody where you can work for free on the side, maybe an hour or 2 a night or 2 to 3 nights a week, just to get the experience. I had a guy that approached a friend of mine and said, hey, I really need experience. I will work for you at your IT consulting business for free 2 days a week for 2 hours, a night. So he gave this guy 4 hours a week of free work. And he said, after when I graduate, all I want you to do is just write me a paper that says, or, a recommendation says that I worked for you for this time and I did a good job. So the guy, gave him 4 hours a week for free work. And then a year later, the guy wrote him a letter and he got a real good, nice job. So your interview skills. Remember, Stark State has a career development department that's over in the S building, right by it's on the other corner or opposite of the cafeteria. And it's right by the ATM machine in that corner. And in there, they do a lot of interview help. They will actually videotape you while they're asking you interview questions. You can kind of see yourself to see if you have any weird nervous habits or what you look like from the other end. They have mock interviews where somebody comes in from Timken or Diebold or some other big company, and they actually ask you interview questions for a couple minutes, and then they tell you what they thought of your skills. They have a sheet of the 100 most often asked questions in an interview, so that you can kind of go over that and kind of think about what you're going to say if you get asked one of these questions. So they can really help prepare you for an interview. Your tuition pays for that. Trust me, your tuition doesn't all go to pay me. It goes for all these different services that you are not using. So if you want to get a good job, separate yourself from the other graduates. Work on your interview skills. Get a degree, get a certification. Try to get some experience. All right, so again, skills, what a worker must be able to perform. abilities, what you have to physically or what other special needs do you have. Obviously, you're going to have to be able to lift 30 to 40 pounds. You need to be able to move PCs and monitors. Back in the old days, everything was heavier. You know, the PCs had steel cases. Monitors were tube type, and they weighed a frickin' ton. Do you need any language abilities? Again, my friend that works for Palo Alto, he speaks 2 or 3 different languages, so they love him because they can send him all these different foreign countries. He already knows the language. So, as far as IT goes, where's your path after help desk or just to get into IT? You can be a programmer, so I'm writing codes or I'm developing applications. And nowadays, you know, years ago that was very technical. We had very complicated languages like Pascal and Fortran and just crazy stuff. Today, like for the iOS, they've come out with a new language called Swift. And Swift is relatively easy to learn, way easier than any other language I've ever dealt with. So you can pay $99, which gives you access to the Apple Store as a developer. You can write your own apps in Swift for free. Plenty of YouTube resources to show you how to do that. And you can start selling apps on the iStore. All right, you can be a network technician. A network technician typically looks at connectivity issues. You know, can this office connect to this office? Can this user access this network resource? That kind of stuff. Website manager. Do I manage websites? Am I creating websites? Am I hosting websites? Am I providing support as a support manager? Or I could be a project manager. A lot of times in some of the bigger organizations, the top IT guy, like the director of IT or something like that, will not be a technical person. He'll be an administrative person. Typically, he's a high-level manager or a project manager, things like that. Am I training people? Am I a technical writer? Am I writing documents to help users? Am I a security specialist? So there's a lot of different ways to branch out. 9 times out of 10, when you graduate from the college, you're going to get an entry-level help desk job. And then from there, you're going to kind of find, eventually you find a field that you're going to gravitate to. Some people love security. They like, I want to block the bad guy out. I want to be better than the bad guy. I want to be like the movie Hackers, and you do that. Other people lean toward the network technician. Hey, I want to move data from here, you know, across the transatlantic pipeline to New York, that kind of thing. I want to get big into Cisco and those other things. Or I want to do website stuff because this is really cool and I can just pop out these websites and I can start YouTubing and make a big YouTube channel and attach it to my websites and start making money from Google Ads and things like that. So once you get your feet wet and you start getting experience at the help desk, eventually another path will open up for you. Well, I would say nobody, but there are people that stay at help desk forever. Anytime you get a job and that help desk person has been there for more than 5 years, either that company is terrible or that user is terrible. I'm sorry, that IT guy. Within 5 years, you should be out of the help desk and into something else. Either starting to work on their servers, but you get the idea. All right, so to wrap it up, you know, early computers were large, centralized. You know, we had to have all our computers connected together. We had all these databases that were all connected together, and then you had to go to those databases to do things. Nowadays, we can all do things decentralized because our computers are spread throughout the organization. I can go to any computer and access the information I need. End users can be categorized a whole bunch of ways. Resources or total cost of ownership has to be calculated whenever we're making purchasing decisions. And blah, 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 blah. Ooh, you get the idea. All right. One thing before I wrap this chapter up. As a help desk person or a college student, we typically tend to look at some of the classes as a waste. English. Why do I need to take English? Why do I need the speech class or the communication class? Why do I need the math class? Things like that. As an IT person or a help desk person, they expect so much of you. It's crazy. You're going to be writing reports and you're going to be talking to committees. Hey, you know, we need a new email system and here's why. And you're going to have to present these projects, you know, to professionals. You can't be using words like, I asked a question and blah, 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 weird ghetto speak, things like that. You can't submit emails that are written with terrible grammar and misspelled words. Things like that. So all this stuff comes into play. So make sure that like you're focusing on all your classes, and that way you're like the total package when you get in there. All that stuff comes into play eventually. All right, so that's it. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you email me. And besides this, let's look at what else you got to do this week. Yeah. So if I go to Chapter 1, under Materials, there's some practice stuff just to check your understanding. Again, that is not graded. You can also go to Assignments, and you have a discussion for Week 1. And so basically you just have to answer a couple questions. And then on the web, so they want you to visit some links and write a response for each of these questions. So when I look at it, you'll see something like this. So they want you to read Peter Drucker's article, The Age of Social Transformation, and then write a paragraph based on what you saw. And then go to this website and write a paragraph on that. And then go to this and write this. And go to this and write what you felt about this. For those of you guys that are really serious about a long career, eventually you're going to get into management. And management is easier to get into if you've got that focus from the start. Peter Drucker is like the management guru. I think he's dead now. I'm not quite sure. But he was the guy that at the end of World War II, they didn't really listen to him in the U.S. So he went over to Japan and helped them redesign their economy. Maybe it was a little bit after World War II. Because initially Japan had a bunch of, like, anything that we would get would be crappy from Japan. Made in Japan just meant crap. Now, after, Drucker has been there for a couple of decades, Toyota and Honda and other companies over there have really changed the way they did things and managed their facilities, and now they make quality products, and they're actually, crushing the U.S. But Peter Drucker's been back in the U.S. for another decade. Some companies are listening to him, others not. But he's a big management guy. A lot of information about management and effective management. There's a lot of managers out there, and sadly, they're kind of like armpits. Most of them stink. But you get the idea. All right, so that's what you do for that assignment, and then you have a quiz. Hooray! So again, you're going to use your book, and you're going to kind of like answer these 25 whopping questions. If for some reason you get stuck on a question, make sure you ask your neighbors, things like that, or use the internet. Most of these questions should come out of your book. So look in your book first. If you have the electronic version of your book, it's a lot easier to search it using Control F. But you get the idea. So you have 3 assignments this week. And again, if you have any questions, remember, make sure you put some effort into it yourself. Try to find the answer, ask some people, try to Google it, and if that doesn't work and you've actually really tried, drop me an email and I'm more than happy to help you out. All right, again, that's it. Let me know if you need any help.